Yeah, so I got a comment from a subscriber on an old video, not an old video, an older video, asking me to explain why I don't like Bernie Sanders, what he did to me. Now, I will say, as far as politicians go, there was a long time where he was the only American politician I liked. This is because I was young and stupid. But the world teaches you. And what makes Bernie a problem? We can look at this from any number of angles, but I'll try to simplify it to his psychology, his actions, and I think the outcomes, maybe who he is, what he is. So, psychologically speaking, here, Bernie has been a government employee his whole life. I don't know if it was since he turned 30 or if it's been the last 30 years or the last 50. But Bernie has never had a real job. So he's never actually had any sort of understanding of the real world. What he has a lot of understanding with is being a political insider, somebody whose whole existence revolves around, talking to people and putting on an act, which is unfortunate because you never know with these people. Are they being genuine or is it another act? That's the problem with all these politics people. They're fake. So he is not a real socialist. He's not a real man of the people. He is a political player, just like AOC. AOC was never anything but a self-interested political player. That's how I see it. So that's Bernie in a nutshell, and it's really disappointing, but you have to look at him and see what he actually is. He's just this old guy who spent his whole life at the pinnacle, far beyond what he should be. I don't know how he got into any of his positions, you know? I don't know if there's something I'm not noticing, you know, about him, about his background, what makes him so popular. But again, prior to 2015, I didn't know who he was. Nobody cared who he was. And worse, when you look at it, you see that for a long time, and I don't know if he still has it, he had that independent right beside his name, independent, because he wanted to show he's not a Democrat. He doesn't go along party lines. I haven't looked at his voting record, but I can tell you he is a de facto Democrat. And worse, the fact that he wanted to always be like independent, to me that says that he is a psychopath, an actual, like a narcissist obsessed with this fake image he's created. So the tea leaves do not look good for Bernie in all of this, in this whole regard. All right. So that's his personality. It's not a good one. Now he'd like to make the world a better place. I haven't practiced my Bernie accent, or I could have done this whole video in that. But I don't think that he genuinely wants to do any of the stuff that he does. He does it because it makes him feel like he's doing the right thing. Okay, and I could do a great Bernie impression, I'm sure, but I don't like that guy anymore. Now, if you want to look at the history, that's when you can connect the dots. Again, I didn't know who Bernie was until he started running. And when I first saw him, I thought, well, this guy, he's making some sense. But Bernie started running in 2015 for the 2016 election. No, 2016. He started running in 2015 for the 2016 election that would have got you in office at the beginning of 2017. And the problem was, if you look at that storyline, what actually happened is Bernie wanted Elizabeth Warren to run against Hillary Clinton. This is because Bernie understood, being a Democratic Party insider, that it was her turn. It was her turn, Hillary's turn, to be the first American female president. And Bernie knows when it comes to identity politics, you can't really challenge the machine. So he was thinking, you have to run somebody who is a female against her. Otherwise, it's not going to work because identity politics or whatever. So he kept on exhorting uh, Elizabeth Warren to be the candidate, and she did not take it. And we can talk about Elizabeth Warren, but it's enough to say that during the 2020 campaign, people started posting snake emojis on things that she would share. And it got to the point, the people being Bernie bros, and it got to the point where Bernie had to decry that behavior and say, you gotta stop posting snakes. She's my good friend Elizabeth Warren. All right. So that's the issue. That's Elizabeth Warren in a nutshell. She's Eve. All right. Because if you even look at it, okay, as I understand it, she was a Republican for 42 years. At the age of 42, suddenly a light shone on a mountain. Shone down on the mountain. I think the British people say it differently. Shone. So the light shines down on the mountain, right? And she's like, oh my gosh, all these things I've been doing, I was so wrong. I guess it's a road to Damascus moment. And she recognized that being a Republican is bad. So she went Democrat, ran against Rick Scott, I think it was. I don't know. All that nonsense. That was a whole load of just political theater. Anyway, point being, Bernie wanted Elizabeth to run. And guess what? As it turns out, Elizabeth is a terrible candidate. So was Bernie ever serious about actually beating Hillary? Because when Elizabeth didn't go forward with it, he did. And he became the most popular person in the United States. Hands down. From my perspective, at a certain point, if you were poor, or if you're a regular person even, maybe not even the poor, everybody loved Bernie. All right. At a time, it was like everybody's like, yeah. The only person who didn't like him was Joe Rogan. I remember a clip of Joe Rogan flying back from Australia with Dana White and I think a third person in the private jet. And Joe Rogan's talking about Bernie. He's like, this ideas are crazy. He wants to tax the rich people. It's nuts. He's like a communist. And 3 years later, Joe Rogan has Bernie on his show and he's sucking up to him because, oh, Bernie's a good guy, turns out. But I remember that. I remember Joe Rogan coming down hard on Bernie, thinking he's a communist and talking about it on his podcast. I think it was the Ronda Rousey coming back. I remember this. I wouldn't have listened to Joe Rogan fight thing otherwise. It was a big deal. It was Ronda Rousey post Australia. They're coming back. I don't think Ronda was with him. But my point is that's the podcast to find. So, point being, gosh, I got sidetracked there. So, Bernie ran, and I won't say anything that'll get me in trouble with YouTube, but enough DNC shenanigans ensued. You remember Deborah Wasserman Schultz, all right? So we don't need to go into the details, but suffice it to say that 2016, the primary, was blatantly, I don't think it was thumbed, but there was a thumb on the scale, so to speak, to the point that there was no scale, just a thumb. All right, and Bernie took it almost like he knew what was happening. He took it in stride. He took your $200 million, $27 donations from all kinds of regular people, and he put up a fake defense. And then when they told him, well, you're not going to make it at the DNC, he put his support behind Hillary 100%. 100%, because Trump is so bad that we have to, vote blue for Hillary. Vote blue for, to save the world. Then we got Trump, which was like, I gotta make another video about that, but I love the guy. It's hard not to like him. But he's a complicated person. Anyway, back to Bernie. So what does this tell you? First of all, that was the first election. Second election happens. And this is where shame me, shame me once, fool on you. Fool me once, shame on you, right? Fool me twice, can't get fooled again. That's how Bush says it. So the first time Bernie runs and fails, gets railroaded by the establishment. You could say, fair play, we played the game and we lost. It's no big deal. You can't do that same thing again, Bernie, and not be a grifter. This is the thing. Bernie comes off, to me, to anybody who's looking at it. Okay, and my opinion is not even special. I've borrowed it. I'll tell you from who. But you can't pull that whole $27 fighting the millionaires and billionaires and all that, and then repeat the exact same process 4 years later, have the same thing happen to you. This time, from my perspective, the actions that were taken were even more blatant. They were disgusting. All right. See what happened in Iowa. All right. Just Iowa by itself shows you just what kind of a mess they were doing. First, they pulled the, the register or something? There's a poll that they always would do in Iowa to see who's the leading candidate in the race. Guess what? Apparently that was the only year that some weird stuff happened, and they had the survey, they had the poll pulled. It was removed. It was gone. The Des Moines Register, I believe. So you didn't find out who was the leading candidate before the caucuses, although we know who it was. Then what? The app. They did the tallying using an app, and somehow it was even worse than doing it manually. So the DNC, I don't know, project app, I don't know what you call the commissioned app that they have, totally messed up the election in Iowa. So, I mean, then you had New Hampshire and South Carolina, whatever happened. But the point is, Nevada was another one. The point is that there was a whole lot of, shenanigans going on. And the first election, you say that's fine. But the second election, Bernie, this is collusion. At this point, it's collusion. And that's the whole point, which is why I think his psychology reveals that he's a narcissist, and his conduct throughout the history shows that he was never serious. And third, this is the cherry on top for me, all right? When you look at his opinions, his stances, Bernie's an idiot, all right? He's not even a good guy. He's a bad guy, all right? Now, yeah, part of that is subjective, but his foreign policy is the usual strong military, but only use them when it benefits us, which is like, I understand, we've said before, there are no good guys or bad guys in geopolitics. But when you start taking that stance, there is still always going to be bias. And Bernie has a disgusting level of bias. Let me see if I can pull up something for you. Now, this is a tweet. I looked at his 2015 Georgetown discussion, and this guy, he's always got a problem. I'll tell you. First of all, I'm for everybody having free food, water, shelter, and healthcare to some extent. All right. I mean, because it's not free. You got to pay some jerk doctor to come and do the healthcare. So you have to actually play it smart. Okay. But I think everybody should have free healthcare. Just how we define what healthcare is. So, point being, all right, Bernie hates the rich people. He just hates them. I don't know why. It's just part of his personality, I think, growing up. But in criticizing how things were being done in 2015, he says that he's always focused on the oil, wealthy, I don't know what he calls them, resource-rich countries. All right. That's fine. 2015, times have changed. Right now, if you go to Saudi Arabia, women have all of their rights. Okay, I mean, maybe this is news to you. This is not news to anybody who's plugged into the network, all right? Women have got their rights. They got every single right they could ask for and more. They're luckier, uh, probably, than women in anywhere else in the world at this point, okay? Just based on the metrics. In October, here he says this. He tweets from his Senator Sanders, he tweets, the Saudi Arabian regime treats women as third-class citizens. Okay, then he goes on, tortures civilians and now is siding with Putin in the war against Ukraine. Bernie's foreign policy is trash. It's always been trash. This is one of the biggest problems with him. He's basically a warmonger. He's basically a neocon. Okay? He wants other people to fight more wars. That's his balance for it in a way. But he treats women as third-class citizens. Now, I don't know how you're doing the math, but they're at least on par with men, which would be like maybe second, I don't know, maybe not. You gotta have good money to be first class, right? But so he's putting out tropes about foreign countries, sexist tropes. That's the Bernie Sanders you have. Somebody who should be plugged in, who should know what's going on in the world, still uses these rich and ethnic countries as his, as his pariah. So when you sum up the big picture of who Bernie is, he's a dumbass. He's a real dumbass, and anybody who likes him, unfortunately, is at that level of dumbassness. You gotta leave. You gotta be an ex-Bernie bro, like me. I don't like the guy anymore. So that is it in a nutshell. The other question, this has gone on a long time. Been doing too much weeds. But the subscriber also asked about democratic socialism. I'll say it again. All right, I looked into it. I read the history and all that. First of all, besides, if you can find a specific person like Eugene Debs, in my opinion, on Bernie's basically borrowed from Jimmy Dore and from Chris Hedges. So it's not unique. All of that stuff I was telling you, maybe they just, informed me of what I should think. I don't know, okay? But these democratic socialist things, it's all a mess. It's just like people. So I guess this is the main point of the video, really, is that if you look at how do I put this? If you look at the capabilities that we have to organize, to communicate across digital platforms, wherever we are with our technology, most of these concepts and even political movements or ideologies, they are redundant. You don't need them anymore. They're outdated. We don't need any kind of, I don't want to sound like a crypto bro, but we don't need all of these in-person meetings and all these institutions and hierarchies. Those were necessary because we didn't have this infrastructure. Right now you could have like a giant Telegram group or a giant Facebook group to organize your politics. So reading about these socialists and Democrats and other thinking groups, I don't know if they were ever necessary. I think they were, but they are not necessary now. And people who try to connect with them I think it's basically a Fed operation. I think those things are all infiltrated. And I think Jimmy said the same thing. Because it's the same thing as having an astroturfed internet. You just have to figure out what part of the system do you have to corrupt, do you have to compromise in order to attain your objectives, whatever they may be. So if you want to just sheep herd people and distract them and never let them make any progress, grab onto one of those big organizations and put the right people to lead it so that it never goes anywhere. So that's my view on all these democratic socialists kind of movements. They're not probably real. So that's that. I hope it was informative. Good luck.